Over the past nearly 4 years, a hallmark of the Biden administration's foreign policy has been the avoidance of moves that they feared could lead to escalation of international conflict. But since the decisive victory of President-elect Donald Trump, that appears to have changed. Late yesterday, President Biden approved sending anti-personnel mines to Ukraine, reversing a previous policy. And this comes just days after the White House gave the green light for Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied longer-range missiles that will strike deep within Russia. What could be behind these moves, and what could the effects be? Joining me now to discuss this and more is Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama. He serves on 4 Senate committees, including the Armed Services Committee. Coach, welcome back to Washington Watch. Good to see you.
Hey, Tony, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Thank you. What do you make of the latest move by the Biden administration?
Well, it's just trying to dig a deeper hole for President Trump when he takes office, Tony. That's all they're trying to do. He's trying to put his legacy in. Unfortunately, the only thing that this is going to do is going to get more people killed on both sides, more people injured. It's not going to prove anything. Listen, number one, Ukraine can't win. They never could win this fight. It's just been a money laundering scheme from day one. Obviously, we would love for Ukraine to be able to push back against Russia, but that has not been possible. Now, we have spent $218 billion, Tony, on this war to this point, and spending, by the way. Our allies, NATO allies, and the world have only spent $52 billion. So the American taxpayers have funded almost all of this war. We've made no progress. They're losing more every day in Ukraine in terms of their land. And Joe Biden just escalated it. And it scares me to death because, President Trump's going to come in. He's going to try to put some sense of reality in this, but they're making it worse and worse. And that's all by design.
Do you think in these next 2 months during this window of transition that this could escalate beyond the borders of those two countries?
Well, I think that the guy that's got more common sense than anybody is Vladimir Putin. Now, he is dead wrong on what he did of coming into another country, but he said, I'm coming in, I'm protecting my Russian people in Ukraine. But at the end of the day, this was not our fight. We should have gone in there. And even Vladimir Putin wanted, after 2 months, decided to call a peace treaty to this, but we called it off. They had a peace treaty done in Istanbul, Turkey, about 2 months after the war started. And we talked Zelensky out of making peace. And so blood is on Joe Biden's hands, and he's going to go out with this all being on his watch. And again, he's making it tough for President Trump to put any kind of end to this, but President Trump will end this. I don't know how he's going to do it, but he's the best negotiator in the world. We have 0 negotiators in the Pentagon or the White House as we speak.
What do you make of Vladimir Putin's announcement that they're lowering the threshold for the decision to use nuclear weapons? Do you see that threat as real?
No, not really. What is he going to do? I mean, he said, listen, I don't know whether any of these missiles have nuclear warheads on them. And so he's having to prepare his people for anything that happen. He's dealing with a scared leader, so-called leader in Zelensky in Ukraine. And he's dealing with a bunch of crazies in this Pentagon over here that's all they're wanting to do is keep this fight going and prove that they were right all along, but they know that they're wrong. And again, if Joe Biden wanted to do anything other than giving more missiles to shoot into Moscow and giving mines put on the ground to kill innocent people, he would load up his plane, leave at the Amazon where he's bird watching, and fly to Moscow and say, okay, let's get this done. I'm almost history as United States president, but I want to get this done. Let's get it over with, quit killing people. But there is no sense of reality, no common sense in this White House.
Speaking of the Department of Defense, according to reports, the Department of Defense failed its 7th consecutive audit this past Friday because it was unable to fully account for its nearly $1 trillion budget, $824 million. Does something need to be done there?
Oh, something's going to be done. And, a new sheriff's getting ready to be in town. His name is Donald Trump. along with his deputies, Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk. They are fired up about coming in and start throwing stink bombs in all these buildings in Washington, D.C. saying, get out and let's do the accounting and let's find out where the taxpayers' money are going. We're tired of spending it. Tony, the bureaucracy up here is about 10 layers deep. They never fire anybody. By the way, then nobody works in the office down here anymore. You have all these beautiful buildings here for all these bureaucrats and all these agencies, and they all work from home. And it's time to go back to work. It's time to work for the American people. And if you don't want to do it, retire, do something else. But President Trump is going to get some sense of reality here. Tony, we don't have another chance. This will be the last time in my lifetime we'll have a chance to save this country. We only have 2 years to do it. President Trump is going to hit the ground running, and we have to put everybody on notice that you got to be accountable for every dime. And if you get that money, you spend it the right way. You spend it on the American people. You protect the American people, and you do everything you possibly can to give us a chance and opportunity to lower taxes where people here can live a lot better life.
So Coach Tuberville, you've been here long enough to know that things are not functioning. What do you see as the top 3 changes you would like to see as Donald Trump comes in and you've got a Republican Senate and you've got a slim majority, but you've got a majority of Republicans in the House? What do you think is, number one, what needs to be done and what's possible to get done?
Yeah, first of all, we got to redo the tax bill that President Trump put into effect a few years ago. We got to make it permanent law. We got to drop taxes for the American people. Everything that the Biden administration has done is they regulated and taxed. This climate hoax that they've been pushing on everybody across the world, including the United States, is nothing but a tax. So we got to do the tax reform. We've got to close the border. We got to build our military back, and we got to do something about education. We got to get God back in our schools, talk about families. We got 2 genders. We got to do everything possible to get back to common sense, but we got to teach these kids to read, to write, civics, history, science, the basic things, because, Tony, as we speak, half the kids in this country can't read past the 6th grade reading level. And you got these teachers unions that are sucking the American people dry on $27,000 per student a year that we spend, which is almost twice as much as any other country. And our kids are being cheated of an education. We're 29th in the world in education when we should be number 1.
President Trump has said in part it's disassembling the Department of Education. Do you see this as giving education back to the states? Because honestly, the federal government doesn't provide that much. About 7 to 10% of the funding comes from the federal government, but they put a lot of strings on that 7 to 10%. Is this something the federal government needs to get out of?
Yeah, the federal government basically holds the states hostage. If you don't do this, if you don't do that, we're not going to send you your federal money. You're exactly right. Most of the money comes from the states. So President Trump needs to come in. And again, this is the reason I ran for this job. And you and I have talked about this because I went into high schools and elementary schools and higher ed schools for the last 35 years before I got in this business. And I was shocked at what they were teaching, what was on the transcripts. The no education whatsoever in our urban areas. Our rural areas are not bad, but the teachers unions have had a stranglehold on parents and the things that they're doing in these schools. So yes, President Trump will have a Secretary of Education, which is McMahon, I think. And I think that the first thing that we have to do there is we've got to streamline Washington, D.C. We've got about 3,000 employees. Why? Why do we need those? It's time to cut our losses, have a small group up here in Washington, D.C., send the education back to the states, let them make decisions for their own communities, for their own state. Every state is different, and do the things that we need to do to educate our kids. It's the number one thing that we have to do to change this country around, because it's about family and education and God. And those 3 things, if we don't get those back, this country will not survive as the greatest country on the face of the earth.
You're absolutely right. We've got to get on the other end of the pipeline and make sure these kids that the indoctrination stops. And the best way to do that is let the local communities do that, get it away from Washington, D.C. Coach Tommy Tuberville, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony. God bless.